Do you want to know about the housing market in Virginia Beach in August of 2020? Well, that's what we're talking about today, so stay tuned. Hey, my name is Sansalone and I'm a real estate agent in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And if it's your first time, that's great. Hit the subscribe button, the bell notification, that will notify you every time I do a new video, and the like button. And if you do hit the like button, that would incredibly bless me because it tells the YouTube algorithms that I'm doing a great job and it spreads the word. So today we're talking about the August 2020 real estate market in Virginia Beach. So this information is specifically for Virginia Beach today, but it applies generally speaking to other cities, but each city is different in this area and there are a lot of cities in here. So I don't want a blanket statement all this information to each city. So if you do have questions about other cities nearby that are in this general region, please let me know and I can give you some more context to give you more specifics about those cities. Let's get into some detail. Now, we don't really need to recap what happened in March because we've done that in past videos. I did a video in May talking about what had transpired since the global situation happened. And so there were a lot of buyers in the April, May, June time period that were ready to buy, but there aren't as many houses to buy, fewer supply. That means that people that wanted to buy had more competition between each other to get the same houses that they originally would have possibly not had as much competition in the year before. And I did an update in May that was telling you more about this concept. Well, that has kind of stayed the same through the summer months and even more so. But I want to give you some more context about that and show you what's happened specifically to give you some idea of what to do about what's going on right now, because there are a couple factors I think that are really important for you to know that will help you decide if now is a good time to buy or not. So let's go to the computer so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, this is a graph that shows every price range in Virginia Beach, detached houses, 3 or more bedrooms, 2 or more bathrooms. Now, this is the average days on market for houses in this criteria, okay? Over the last 10 years or so, you'll notice this graph slowly goes down. Let's look at this most recent section of numbers. March, when all the craziness started happening, 37 days on market. It's gone down lower than that, all the way down to 31 days average on market in July. So this means that for every house that sells in one day, there's one that sells in like 62 days. So that also means that when someone says that the market is really, really active, it doesn't mean that every house that goes in the market is going to sell right away. Because in order to get the average in that 31 number, you got to have ones that sell real fast and some that don't. But it does mean that there are more houses that sell faster than typical markets. So it's really important to figure out, based on what your specific needs and wants are the things that you're looking for, things that most people are looking for. And that's something that you be able to think through yourself and also get counsel with your agent to figure that out. But if it's something that you think that is more in demand, you might have to expect that the houses that you want will probably sell quickly. Let's take that and go to the next graph. Homes for sale in the same criteria over time. If you notice, you see the ridges here. Every year, the ridges, the highest part of the ridge is going up into summertime and then continues into the summertime, right? Even last year, the top one was July, and that was 1,445 houses on the market in July. Well, go down to 2020. Once all the stuff happened in the world, 922 houses in March, the amount of houses were already lower than normal. So people were not selling houses as much before March. But once March happened, you see that graph going up. It immediately stopped and started going down. And then only 781 houses in July of 2020. This is the lowest it's been in over 10 years and during the most active time of the year. So that means that there are fewer people that want to sell their house in the time that most people are going to want to sell their house. That's interesting because that there are as many or more buyers in this time period in the year than there are typically that want to buy. So even though the number of houses that were on the market were much lower, the amount of houses that were selling was much higher than normal. So now let's go into the amount of houses that have sold in this time period to give you some more context. Same thing. Notice in June, July, the highest ridge, the amount of houses that have closed in these months has been usually May, June, or July. Look at this. As we go into the spring and then shooting up, June, July, it shoots way up to 639 houses in July have closed. So the question is, why is that happening? Well, the first reason is that there are a lot of buyers out there that are ready to buy. Then you add the fact that the interest rates are significantly lower than they've ever been. This is the lowest I've seen, not even close. So that means that the price that you would be paying now in sales price is actually still lower in payment than a previous sales price for that same house earlier in the year. Why does that matter? Let's go to the next graph, the average sales price average in the same criteria over time. So you see, starting in 2011, the trend is going up. Well, if you notice, these last 3 months, May, June, July. May, 386 and change, June, 391, July, 418. That jump there, $27,000 difference in jump between June and July. And that's a lot, it's a big difference. So I know that when you see that number shoot straight up like that, the first thought is, well, do I want to get involved and buy a house in a market like that? I don't want to be caught up in the hysteria, you know? But let me get into some specifics of the numbers and give some context to these numbers. Let's do a little exercise. Let's say you bought a house in June for $391,000. And let's say you had an interest rate of 4%. Well, let's do the math. What is the payment for that house minus taxes and insurance? Just the principal and interest of the loan. So that total payment for that price range at $391 and change with a 4% interest rate without taxes and insurance would be $1,869.79. Now let's go to the July average sales price and see how much that would be for a 3% interest rate and see the difference. Now that sales price and interest rate, the total payment is $1,765.23. So while the sales price was actually higher, almost $30,000 higher, the payment was significantly lower in relation. That's because the interest rate was so different. Now, I'm not saying that the interest rates are so much different now that you just pay whatever you want, get whatever house you want because the payment's gonna be lower. But I'm just trying to illustrate the point here that interest rates are so low and that the interest rate you get matters as much sometimes as the sales price itself. So what does this mean for people that are trying to buy and might move in a year? Not a whole lot. I would not suggest making a purchase decision based on lower interest rates if you're planning to stay for a year. You could speculate that a house value would go up, but I never want to encourage someone to buy a house just for the expectation or hope that a value will go up, because you might get a cheap interest rate, but you're still buying it at that higher price. So you need to know that it's worth your while to stay in this house for a little while. But the longer you stay in a house with a lower interest rate, the less you're paying total for that house over time. So if you did stay in that house or got the house and rented it but kept the loan for that 30-year time period, you would save money even though you paid more in sales price. So I try to encourage people not to necessarily not just focus on the sales price, but look at the entirety of what your plan is. If you're planning to stay in a house for a long time or keep it as a rental, you might find it more interesting to go after a house even though the sales price might feel bigger because the interest rate might be low enough to offset that cost. But if you're planning on staying for a year or two, that might not matter as much, and I would say don't focus on the interest rate as much. Don't make it as much of a purchase decision. Decide if you're staying in the house long enough to justify buying the house, period. Now that being said, if you find that you do want to buy in this city right now, there are some strategies that I want to add to based on the new information that is current to this market right now in August. If you find a house that you like and talk to your agent, you know it's going to go off the market really quickly, what do? There are some things you can do if you want to get this house. Number one of the first things to do is be quick. You've got to be ready to jump on whatever house comes on the market. That's number one. Then the second thing is make sure your agent is communicating well with the other agent and also communicating well with the lender you're working with, so then the agent can make sure that everybody involved in the sale can be confident that your offer will close and close smoothly. That is a big deal for sellers because they know now they're getting a lot of offers. They're trying to decide between one or the other, and sometimes those kinds of things can make a huge deal and give them confidence to pick yours over somebody else's. Going over asking price is not a bad idea. Now, I'm not saying you should at every house. This is definitely a case-by-case basis, but it definitely is important for specific houses. Sometimes you got to. And so some of the best houses that go on the market, they are going to be sold over asking price. So if a house is on the market for $380 and you think, well, I really want this house, you might need to offer $390. Something that's realistic to what the house might value for, because what you don't want to do is offer too high and the house not appraise. And what that often does is it can make the sellers not want to work with you because they know that you might not be realistic, and once the house doesn't appraise, you might not buy the house. And so they'd rather go with somebody that gives them confidence that A, is much of the sales price as they can get, and B, has the highest chance of appraising. Now, if you do make a higher offer over asking price, here's one thing I would suggest, and I used to not say this at all, but this is becoming more and more of something to think about. Guaranteeing the amount of sales price you offer is the amount that you'll pay, even if it's over the appraisal value. Meaning, if you offer $390 on a $380 house and it only appraises for $385, be willing to offer to pay that difference in cash. I know it's more money out of pocket, but it can be the difference between getting that house and not. The next thing is, do not ask for closing costs. Unless you really have to, do not ask for closing costs. In this kind of a market, sellers will pick one that they don't have to do that with as opposed to one that they do. So if you have the money to pay for your own closing costs, I would suggest, if at all possible, please do that. And another thing I would strongly suggest is to limit or eliminate as many contingencies as possible in your offer. For instance, if you're including a home inspection contingency, if you ask for repairs along with that inspection, the likelihood of you getting that offer accepted in a competitive house situation is a lot lower. I would suggest the idea of maybe saying up front that you will not ask for repairs, that you just want to get an inspection to make sure that you're comfortable with the condition. Some people I've talked to have been even willing to waive those inspections, and I don't feel comfortable suggesting that kind of a thing. But I'm just telling you what has happened that I've experienced from other people. Or if you have a house to sell, I get that there are a lot of times where it's hard to get around that kind of a thing, but the reality is that the more of these types of contingencies that require the seller to wait or create question as to if you're actually going to be able to close, the less likely the seller will take your offer over other offers if there are multiple coming in at the same time. So the stronger your offer can be without the level of risk that the seller would have to take on to move forward with your offer, the better and more likely it is for the seller to accept your offer. Next thing is use a local lender. I cannot emphasize this enough. The lender you choose matters so much in the process in a kind of market like this. If you find a lender that if you're coming from a different state and you have a lender that you've worked with from that state, that lender might not have the expertise for this specific area as opposed to someone who's been here for a long time. This matters because there are certain criteria in each area that can change, and that sometimes lenders don't realize those changes or those differences until later in the process, when then all of a sudden the numbers will change, or the process length can change, or the person might not qualify like the way the lender may have thought from the beginning. So making sure a lender is local and that lender can communicate with the listing agent to give confidence to that listing agent that your loan can close and close quickly, that is incredibly valuable and makes a huge difference. And another thing is larger earnest money deposits. Earnest money deposits, I've mentioned in other videos, is the deposit you make, basically the good faith money that you give when making an offer. And when the offer is accepted, that money that you're offering gets put into an escrow account and sits in that account until closing. The more earnest money that you offer, the more quote unquote kind of like skin in the game that you're offering. So the higher the amount that it is, the more confidence that the seller has that you're gonna follow through with this process and not back out early. But the one thing, if you've learned anything about this process in this market in this video, it's to know that sales price matters. It matters a lot, but it's not the only thing you should factor into as to whether or not you should buy a specific house and when you should buy that house. So even though the market is active right now, very competitive, and sales prices have increased, it does not necessarily mean that the payments you're paying for that house have also increased. So it's up to you and your agent to decide what makes the most sense for you. So use this information to help determine if buying right now, even if it might be at a higher price, might still be worth it in the long run if you keep the house for a long enough time. Again, I'm not making any predictions in the future because prices can change, they can go down. But again, think about this. If the sales price goes down $5,000 or $10,000 on a house, but your interest rate goes up 1%, that cost of that house, the long-term overtime cost, has gone up. So it's not all about the sales price, guys. It's all about how much you're paying over time and also how long you're keeping the house. If you keep the house for 30 years, you're gonna save money over time. If you keep the house for a year or two, I wouldn't suggest buying because they have a lower payment. You might not actually should be buying at all. And I help people from all over the world move into this area, and I love it. It's amazing. If you have any questions about this area, moving to the area, let me know. I've dropped my contact information in the description. I'll do whatever I can to help you, and I'll see you on the next video.